We're going to talk more about Judges tonight, about the book of Judges, although tonight we're not actually going to talk about a judge. Often when people list the judges, they list Abimelech in the list of judges, but it's pretty clear he's not a judge. The judges are those that God raised up to deliver Israel. And Abimelech was the persecutor, the oppressor, not the savior. He was not a good man in any way. But we'll talk about him tonight. All right. So when we talk about Abimelech, the pictures I have here, the first one on the left is dealing with the fire coming out from the thorns and burning up the cedar trees, and fire coming from the cedar trees to burn up the thorns, which is part of a curse that's going to be fulfilled in this story. And then on the right, we have Abimelech taking some wood up to burn this tower down, and we'll talk about that a bit. But that's just to explain what these images are. All right, so last time we talked about Gideon and how he delivered Israel from the Midianites. God had spoken to him and told him to do this. And after he led the people and they had their freedom, the Israelites said, "You and your sons will rule over us." But he said no. He's not going to rule over them. But he was still a leader. And the people looked up to him and listened to him. And we find that Gideon had 70 sons from many wives. And he had one son from a concubine in Shechem, and that son was named Abimelech. So that's who we're going to talk about. He's actually Gideon's son. And it tells us that as soon as Gideon died, the Israelites turned back to the Baals. So these are the idols that come from the nations around them, and they start worshiping them as soon as Gideon dies. So I guess his sons were not strong leaders in keeping the people following God. In Judges chapter 9 and verses 1 through 6, it says, "Then Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal," which is Gideon, it's another name for him, "went to Shechem to his mother's brothers and spoke with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, 'Please speak in the hearing of all the men of Shechem. Which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal reign over you, or that one reign over you? Remember that I am your own flesh and bone.' And his mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of all the men of Shechem. And their heart was inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, 'He is our brother.' So they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal-berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. Then he went to his father's house in Ophrah, and killed his brothers, the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left because he hid himself. And all the men of Shechem gathered together, all of Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king beside the terebinth tree at the pillar that was in Shechem." So there's a lot of evil going on here. There's murder. 70 of his brothers, 69 because he missed the youngest one. And then we have idolatry involved. They gave him the money from the temple of Baal-berith. Baal-berith is the particular Baal these men were following. Later on, it's just called the stronghold of the god Berith, but it's still Baal-berith. And we see the terebinth tree and the pillar in Shechem where he's made king. That's also associated with this worship of Baal. So we find that this is just an idolatrous people who don't have any sense of morality, it seems. And they're willing to commit murder so that they can have their relative being the ruler. They feel like that's going to give them an advantage. I'm sure nobody in the class knows anybody like that who wants someone from their tribe or family to be the ruler, and they don't care what character they have. Unfortunately, many people are like that. So this is not something specific to these Israelites at this time. That's a character flaw in many people. We have to watch ourselves that we do not become like that and compromise things. But we see the city of Shechem, and we talked about Ophrah last time being where Gideon was. We don't know exactly where Ophrah was. There's another Ophrah, it seems like, that might be even south of Shechem, but I don't really know where this Ophrah was for sure. But that was a guess that some of the people who study these things have put it. But we know where Shechem was. So Shechem is where most of this is going to take place. Ophrah was where he went to kill his brothers. All right, now if we continue reading here in Judges 9, we're not going to do a lot of reading, but we're going to read this part as well tonight, because there's a parable here and a curse that goes with it. All right, so from verse 7, now when they told Jotham, remember he's the youngest brother who escaped being killed, so he's heard that they've made Abimelech king. So when they told Jotham, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim and lifted his voice and cried out. And he said to them, "Listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. The trees once went forth to anoint a king over them, and they said to the olive tree, 'Reign over us.' But the olive tree said to them, 'Should I cease giving my oil with which they honor God and men and go to sway over trees?' Then the tree said to the fig tree, 'You come and reign over us.' But the fig tree said to them, 'Should I cease my sweetness and my good fruit and go to sway over trees?' Then the trees said to the vine, 'You come and reign over us.' But the vine said to them, 'Should I cease my new wine, which cheers both God and men, and go to sway over trees?' Then all the trees said to the bramble," that's the thorn bush, "You come and reign over us." And the bramble said to the trees, "If in truth you anoint me as king over you, then come and take shelter in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Now, therefore, if you have acted in truth and sincerity in making Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as he deserves, for my father fought for you, risked his life, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian, but you have risen up against my father's house this day, and killed his 70 sons on one stone, and made Abimelech, the son of his female servant, king over the men of Shechem, because he is your brother. If then you have acted in truth and sincerity with Jerubbaal and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and Beth Millo. And let fire come from the men of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech." And Jotham ran away and fled, and he went to Beer and dwelt there for fear of Abimelech, his brother. All right, so we see this parable that he tells, the story about the trees wanting a king, and they can't get the nice rulers because they're too busy doing what God gave them to do. So they instead go to the bramble or the thorn bush, and he says, now if if you really are going to have the bramble, the thorn bush, rule over the trees, fine. But if you reject him later, they're going to destroy each other. And he gives this curse that if they did not act in truth and sincerity, which they clearly did not, let fire come from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come from the men of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. So we're going to see that play out in the story. So when we continue reading this story, we find that Abimelech was king over Israel for 3 years. And I assume that's just a small part of Israel. Jotham specifically says he was king of Shechem, but it seems like he was king over more than just Shechem. He didn't even stay in Shechem. But we're going to find that he was ruling in that area. But he was evil. He was very evil from just the beginning to the end. When we talk about judges, those are the ones that God raises up to deliver Israel. But Abimelech didn't deliver Israel from anything. He was the oppressor of Israel. So he is not one of the judges, even though his story is told in the book of Judges. He's never called a judge in the book of Judges. And so he kills 69 of his brothers. Only Jotham escaped, and then Jotham cursed him, and that curse would come true in 3 years. He rules for 3 years. So we find that he appeals to his mother's brothers. That's what Abimelech does, because they would want a relative to rule over them. But remember that a relative with bad character is worse than a stranger with good character. You want someone with good character ruling over you, not just someone you're related to. And that's not something that these people considered, because their character was corrupt as well. And it specifically says that God sent a spirit of ill will between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. So, it started off where they're supporting Abimelech, but then no longer. After just 3 years, they're not on good terms anymore. And we find that the men of Shechem robbed everyone who passed that way, which is not something that Abimelech wanted to happen, because these are his people coming through that way a lot of the time. So he finds out about it, and he's not happy with them. And then someone new came to Shechem. His name was Gaal, and it says the men there put their trust in him. And they had a big drunken party one night, and when he was drunk, he spoke big about wanting to fight Abimelech. Bring out your army, Abimelech, so that I can face you. But of course, he was speaking that way because he was drunk, but it showed what he had in his heart. And Zebul, who was the commander or the ruler of Shechem, but under the authority of Abimelech, heard him say this, and he did not like it. And he reported it to Abimelech and told Abimelech that he needs to come and sort this out, and told him specifically, come at night, set an ambush, that sort of thing. So Abimelech listened. He came with his men, surprised the men of Shechem. In fact, Gaal was outside the gates of the city, and he said, I see people coming. And Zebul told him, no, you're just seeing shadows. And then later on, he saw them closer, and he says, no, those are people. And Zebul says, yeah, now where's your boasting now? Kind of a smug answer there, as Gaal is being surprised by Abimelech and his men coming to fight him, even though Gaal had been boasting about wanting to fight. Well, he did lead the fight. He got his men and went out to fight Abimelech, but they were defeated. And it says that Gaal and his brothers were forced to leave Shechem. And then Abimelech killed a lot of the people in the city. He demolished the city. He sowed the ground with salt so they could not grow crops anymore. If you put salt in the soil, nothing will grow. And he found out that the people of the city were in the stronghold of the temple of the god Baal Berith. Well, that's where he got the money to hire these evil people to kill his brothers, right? This temple of the god Baal Berith. So it goes back to that same place. That's where the people are hiding, is in the stronghold of that temple. Well, he went there, and he was apparently fairly smart with his military skills, and he cut down limbs from trees, told his men to do the same, and they put it around the stronghold, set fire to it, and burned it down, and it killed about 1,000 men and women who were in the stronghold. And of course, we think of that as tragic and really sad to have that many people killed like that. But these were evil people. These were people who were worshiping the god Baal. They had turned away from the true God, and this was God's punishment on them for that and for the wickedness of their involvement in killing Abimelech's brothers, giving him the money to do that. And so this was the fulfillment of the curse, with the fire coming from the thorn bush, which is Abimelech, to burn up the cedar trees that had asked the thorn bush to rule over them. And then they had rejected him later. Well, after that, so Abimelech was successful. He killed the men of Shechem, and that punished them for their part in all of this. But then he went to the city Thebes, and he captured that city. And honestly, I don't know why he attacked that city. There's nothing mentioned about Thebes as being involved in any of this, or maybe they were also rebelling against him, but it doesn't tell us that. It just says he went to Thebes and attacked it and captured it. But they had a tower there, a strong tower where the people would go for safety. And that's where the people ran. And so he thought, well, I'm going to do the same thing that he did in Shechem. He's going to burn it down and kill everybody inside. But when he came near to burn the tower, a woman who was on top of the tower or out the window or something dropped an upper millstone. So these are the stones they would use to grind their meal, mealies, or different grains to grind it down. These are heavy, heavy stones. And if it's dropped from a height on your head, it's going to kill you. And it did, although not right away. It crushed his skull, and he was dying from it. But he asked his armor bearer, who was next to him, to take out his sword and kill him, so that they wouldn't say that he was killed by a woman. And his armor bearer did that. He killed him, but we still say he was killed by a woman, because he was. I mean, that's what led to his death, was her dropping the millstone on his head. And this story is even referred to in the time of David, when they talk about military tactics and not going too close to the wall, because don't you remember what happened to Abimelech when he got too close to the wall and had the stone dropped on his head? So this was one of the stories that was used in military training as what not to do. But this then was the fulfillment of the fire coming from the cedars and destroying the thorn bush. This is the curse being fulfilled. He's the thorn bush, and he is being punished for killing his brothers. And it specifically says, as you read through it, this is how God repaid Abimelech for his wickedness in killing his 70 brothers. And it also says that it's the curse of Jotham that came upon them. So we find that God is involved in all of this. We don't see him doing anything or talking to a prophet or talking to a judge and having him go and do something. But even in the interactions between these wicked people, we find God is involved in bringing about justice for their wickedness. So some of the observations I just want us to look at is God didn't stop the wickedness of Abimelech and the men of Shechem. He allowed these 70 or 69 brothers to be killed. And I don't know if maybe it's because they weren't following God, and maybe Jotham was, and that's why he survived, but I don't know. He doesn't mention Jehovah specifically when he talks about God. So I don't know if he was worshiping Jehovah or if he was also worshiping Baal. But what he had to say was according to the thinking of God. So the curse was heard by God, and he carried it out. But that's because it was in line with how God does things anyway. So God did bring justice for Abimelech's wickedness. It took 3 years. He ruled for 3 years. But he didn't get away with the sin, and the men of Shechem didn't either. They gave the money for this. They didn't actually kill his brothers, but they were very much involved in it. God punished them as though they were the murderers. And we may think that we get away with something if time goes on and, okay, I did this evil thing and I got what I wanted, but nothing bad has happened to me. But the truth is, in time, God is going to bring justice. He's giving you time to repent now. But if we wait and we wait and we wait, it's going to be too late. You can read about that idea in Romans chapter 2. But anyway, this is a kind of an ugly story all the way through. There's not really a good character unless it's Jotham, because what he has to say is right anyway. But God is the hero. He's the one who brings justice. And Abimelech is just wicked, and the people he's dealing with are wicked, and they end up destroying each other through their wickedness. All right, well, that's the lesson for tonight. So thank you very much.